It was maybe her and me and one other person. That's it. And so I went to the office, and I was never into guns. I'm not a hunter. I've never been hunting in my life. If any of you want to bring me back the venison or elk, I'll be happy to eat it, okay? Love it. But I don't hunt. I golf and I play tennis, okay? I don't hunt. But guns never were about hunting to me. A free man owns a gun. That's all there is to it. Okay? So I asked my undersheriff. My undersheriff was a member of the NRA. I never was. I said, hey, do they have a hotline number I can ask questions? You know, I got a legal problem. And he goes, yeah. So I called the toll-free number, and I got transferred about 4 or 5 times, and finally I landed on the desk of one guy by the name of Richard Gardner. And he was a lawyer for the NRA. And I told him what I was wanting to do, and he said, Sheriff, we've been praying that you would call. Because they needed somebody with standing, and I had it. And so they said, we'll get all the paperwork. And he says, in fact, we've already been preparing this case. And he says, we're going to be ready to file it the very day the Brady Bill takes effect on February 28, 1994. And I said, well, I really appreciate your help. And I thank you very much, but I said, I also want to make sure this is my case. It's not the NRA's, so I want my own lawyer as well. He says, that's fine. And I said, can you recommend one? And he said, there's a good lawyer in Tucson, used to work for us. His name's Dave Hardy, and I hired Dave Hardy to be my lawyer, and we went. And so Sheriff Prince was the second one to file. And I heard about that 3 weeks later on CBS Morning News, where he filed a separate action challenging the Brady Bill. And then after that, 5 more. 5 sheriffs, ultimately 7, the magnificent 7 from across the country. 7 out of 3,000 filed this lawsuit. 7. Okay? Now, so a lot of you know where this went. Well, I was really glad that I was not the only one doing this, because I thought they might make an example of me and go after me if I was all by myself. And the first thing we sought, because the Brady Bill, first time in history, threatened, first they commandeered a state officer for federal bidding. Unconstitutional. Can't do it. Okay? Next, they threatened to arrest us if we failed to comply. Ooh. How would that sit with you? Yeah. Threatened to arrest us. So the first thing we saw the very next day after we filed on March 1st, my lawyer sought an injunction against the federal government from being able to arrest me. Isn't that wonderful? I'm seeking an injunction against my own government to not arrest me while I'm sheriff. And we got it. And Janet Reno, as soon as she saw that, hurried up by orders from Clinton and wrote a memo to all the sheriffs in the country. Said, oh, that part of the Brady Bill doesn't apply to you sheriffs. It just applies to the FFLs, the gun shop owners. Oh, well, that's really good. Just we'll arrest those guys, not you sheriffs. We want you to be our buddies. Okay? Yeah. And so we got our injunction. And then we went to the district court in Tucson, and we had our hearing. And both Sheriff Prince and I won. And the one sheriff that lost, we won all of them except one. The one in Texas. Can you believe that? We lost a gun case and a state sovereignty case in Texas. You know? I was amazed. So then, where's the Circuit Court of Appeals for Montana and Arizona? San Francisco. Did we win there? No, we lost. But sheriff in Texas and the sheriff in Louisiana, Sheriff Coog and Romero, won in New Orleans. So now we have 2 conflicting rulings at the circuit level, at the appellate courts. And so that pretty much guaranteed that the Supreme Court would take it. And they did. And when I heard those words from my lawyer, the Supremes have granted certiorari. Some of you lawyers might know what that means. It means they agreed to hear the case. They granted certiorari. Okay? And in September, I lost my bid for re-election as sheriff. And you know what I learned from that? No biggie. It isn't no biggie. Okay? It goes on, life goes on. And what I learned is that politicians need to stop worrying about keeping their jobs and start worrying about keeping their oath. Okay? That's it. So we sued Clintons. We lived to tell about it. And on December 4th, 1996, Sheriff Prince and I were at the United States Supreme Court representing this case. And on June 27th, 1997, it came out over and over in this ruling, and we're going to go over this just a little bit before we close here, that the states are not subject to federal direction. Over and over in this case, it talks about what we've been saying all night long. But we have a United States Supreme Court ruling backing it up. And it is the law of the land. And you're saying judges don't make law. And I said, I know they don't. They reinforced the supreme law of the land. That's all they did in this. So that's why it's the supreme law of the land, because it reinforces the 10th Amendment. We filed on the 10th, not on the 2nd. My motivation was to protect the 2nd. And you know what? There were actually 5 Brady Bills scheduled. We actually changed history because we stopped Brady Bills 2, 3, 4, and 5. They didn't even get, Senator Moynihan tried to introduce number 2 while we were still fighting number 1. And you can tell by all that, it was a pretty stinky mess, you know? And it was. But we won. I want all of you to remember, and we have some of these up at the table, and you can get these books afterwards up at the table. I want to make sure that you have them. And you can get this, or you can Google it. Just Google Mack, Prince versus U.S., and you can get this. Cornell University has the best copy, or you can get one up at our table up there. But I want you to know and understand the principles that were applied to this come right and are all documented. Remember, I plagiarize everything. It's all in there. Of course, some of my personality's in there a little bit here and there. But all of this just comes from the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Gettysburg Address, and of course the document right here that you see, the Supreme Court decision. And it answers, I think, the warning that Thomas Jefferson gives on page 1 of this book, down in the 2nd paragraph. When all government shall be drawn to Washington as the center of all power, it will render powerless the checks provided and become as venal and oppressive as the government from which we separated. End quote. Well, get this. Now, when government today becomes venal and oppressive, to whom can we the people turn for peace, safety, and help? How about the guy that promised you that he would do that? The county sheriff. And then let's move on to page 15. Those of you who have your book, you don't need to look it up, but you can if you want. And page 15 starts what Scalia. You know what Scalia does? He plagiarizes too. You know who he quotes? James Madison over and over, and the Federalist Papers. Can you imagine a Supreme Court decision quoting the Founding Fathers and the Federalist Papers? Did this get crazy or what? It just was more beautiful than I ever could imagine.